Well, I'd like to welcome you to the Foreclosure Answer Man podcast number 7. Today is December 28, 2009. I'm your host, Larry Bass with eReal Estate Team, and I'm located here in the South Denver, Colorado area. If you'd like to go to my blog, of course, it's foreclosureanswerman.com. What we're going to do today is just go over a few terms, maybe 10, 11 terms that deal with foreclosure, what HUDs are, deed in lieu of, first mortgage, second mortgage, just briefly, so you have a little understanding of how these terms work and how they play out in this whole foreclosure process. Many of the definitions I'm going to go through today are from a website called moneymatters101.com. So if you want to go to moneymatters101.com, there's other information about foreclosure as well. It doesn't hurt for you to go to different sites, whether you go to my site, foreclosureanswerman.com, Money Matters 101, Google foreclosure. You'll find all kinds of information out there. But what you want to do is eventually you want to trust someone who you feel has your best interests in mind. So we're going to first start off with the term foreclosure. I have it here on my screen, so you'll be seeing me looking at my screen a little bit. But the Money Matters 101 says foreclosure, of course, it's a legal process that involves the extinguishing of rights of the owner in order to sell the property to satisfy a lien. Now, of course, a lien is your mortgage against the property. There's a lien. You've got mortgage liens. You can have tax liens. You can have HOA or homeowners association liens. You can have mechanics liens, which could be a roofer. All kinds of liens on properties that cloud the title is the term in the real estate world. But usually it's the mortgage company where the property is in default. Now, a lot of times now in the past where we got a lot of the first and second mortgages, people bought a home with an 80% first mortgage, which means if the house cost $100,000, they got an $80,000 first, and then they got a $20,000 or 20% second mortgage, which is in second place. And that's how a lot of these properties were bought here in the last few years, and that's why a lot of people are in trouble. Because the first interest rates, a lot of times, are maybe fixed for 2, possibly 5 years, and then they adjust. And then the second mortgage rates are always at a higher interest rate anyway, probably in the mid-7s, mid-8s, even maybe 9%. So you really had kind of a balancing act on the mortgages, on the interest rates, which affect the payment, of course. So a foreclosure, of course, is when a person is going to have to perhaps give up their rights to the property and give it to the people who they owe money to. Obviously, it's not rocket scientists. Now, pre-foreclosure it's where a property owner tries to sell the house before the house goes through the whole foreclosure process. Because when a house is in foreclosure, it's not actually foreclosed upon until it has gone through the legal, I'm sitting on my cord here. I'll put this in front of me. The legal rights per the state. So when you're doing a pre-foreclosure, that just means the property is getting sold before it goes to the actual sale. Now you have what they call an auction or a trustee sale. In Colorado, we're a trustee state. So the banks, you have one what they call where it goes to the courts, and then you have a public trustee, and that's how we do things in Colorado. And if you want to check out the Foreclosure Answer Man podcast number 2, I do talk with someone from the Douglas County Public Trustee about how the foreclosures works in that county, which is pretty much how it works most part of the state. So an auction or trustee just means after the owner has defaulted on the mortgage, the property is sold by the lender to the highest bidder. Now, what happens is, if you bought a house for $100,000, now work with me here because most houses in Colorado were twice that or 3 times that. But let's just say, for the clarification point, if you paid $100,000 for the house and you defaulted on the mortgage, and let's just say, assume you used one mortgage, you got an FHA loan where at the time was 3% down, so you owe 97% is what you owed against the house. So you still owe $97,000 or more. When the property goes to foreclosure sale, the bank will put in a bid in to cover themselves because they get the first position. They say, hey, after attorney fees and interest that hasn't been paid on a $97,000 balance originally, you may now owe $105,000, $106,000, $107,000. So the bank will say, hey, we will bid $105,241.32. Now, if an investor wants to buy that house, or a second mortgage or third mortgage lien holder, they have to pay the first, that $105,237, whatever. Now, that may be a good deal for a person because maybe the house is now worth $150,000. Maybe it's only worth $90,000. We don't know. If it's worth $90,000, the bank's going to get the house back, and then it's become an REO property, which means real estate owned, which is one of our terms. So when you go to trustee sale, the property is sold, and the homeowner has no more rights to the property. Now, some people have used this term or heard this term called deed-in-lieu of. What that means, they're saying, hey, Mr. Lender, instead of foreclosing on my house, here, let me give you the deed. So here's I'm going to go ahead and sign over the house to you, and you just take the house. Now, a lot of lenders don't want that because they don't want to be real estate companies. They don't want to have to deal with that. They would rather have you go ahead and get a realtor who knows how to work this business, get the house sold, and get it done as quickly as possible. Because that is actually a faster way of getting a house sold through a short sale than for the bank to take it, and the bank has to go through all their bureaucracy and wait in their time frame. Then they still have to go ahead and get it listed with a realtor and fix it up because now the house may be vacant, there may be vandals. Fortunately, around the country, since copper is so valuable, people, most likely probably kids, are going in there and they're actually cutting all the copper lines and pulling it out of the house. So we've seen some even HUD houses, because the houses are vacant, they've gone through and they just snip the copper pipe and they take it and they sell it. I mean, obviously it costs a whole lot more to fix a house like that than they ever made with copper, but these are people who don't care. And they're going to always be those type of people here in the world. So we have the deed in lieu of, and the bank would still prefer to have you do the pre-foreclosure. Now you've got what they call a first mortgage lien holder, and that again is the person who lended the person, or really more the institution, who lended you the majority of the money to buy a house. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast here, there could have been a first lien holder and a second lien holder, which is usually a smaller amount. And the way it works is if the first lien holder gets paid off somehow, then the second lien holder now becomes the first lien holder. It's like going to a movie and you're standing in line. So you've got you here, the next person here, and the third person here. Well, once this first person moves out of line, the second person now becomes the first person. And that's how it works with mortgage liens. Now you've got HUD. You've heard of HUD homes, VA homes, REO homes. A HUD home is, all it is you've got, HUD stands for Housing and Urban Development. It was established back in 1965 to create maybe decent home and suitable living environment for all Americans. It was a great little program because before then a lot of people had to bring a larger down payment, and HUD came in, and at least currently today it's 3.5%. Just a few months ago it was only 3%, but now it's 3.5% that a homeowner needs to bring to closing for the down payment alone part. So you've got a HUD, and under HUD is an organization called the Federal Housing Administration, or FHA. So when you get an FHA loan and your house goes into default, then the FHA loan gets paid off, the loan gets paid off to the banks, and the house then goes into the HUD inventory. Be a little confusing. You would think it would become an FHA home. Well, this is the government. So even though you have an FHA loan, it gets defaulted, it now becomes a HUD house. Same thing with a VA, except VAs are a little smarter because now it's still a VA loan, and if it goes to default, it's a VA home. So no confusion there. We got notice of default. Now, the notice of default, or NED, is a critical piece of paper. Here in Colorado, what will happen is if a person is missing their payments, and usually the banks will not tell our public trustee to go ahead and start the foreclosure process until they're usually at least 3 months behind. Now, they could do it when you're 15 days from the first mortgage payment behind, but that just is not how real life works. Usually it's 90 days, maybe 120 days, 3-4 months, and then eventually the bank says, okay, public trustee, we want you to start the foreclosure process. And then, so the public trustee will go ahead and send the homeowner an NED, or notice of default, saying, hey guy, or person, you are in default, and these are now your rights, these are the steps, blah, blah, blah. And once that notice of default is filed, you are now actually in the foreclosure process. So your home is being foreclosed upon. It becomes public record. You can look it up online. In most counties, Douglas County, you have to pay to do it. It's a revenue source for them. But all the other counties, you can put in the address. You can see whose home has received this NED, this notice of default, and it has started the foreclosure process and the clock ticking. Because in Colorado, once that NED is filed, you've got 110 to 125 days normally before the house is sold at the auction. And once it's sold at the auction, there's no way that the homeowner can now come up with the extra money and pay everyone and bring everyone current. That has to be done before it goes to the auction or the public trustee sale. So that's what the notice of default is. Now in Colorado, it's been maybe almost a couple years now, we actually used to have a process called the redemption period, where it would actually go to sale, and then a homeowner in a typical home, a tract home, would have 75 days to somehow cure the loan, maybe still sell the house until the home became the bank's. Well, that law went away. They kind of added the period on the front end. So once it goes to foreclosure now, there is no redemption period in Colorado, at least on traditional homes. And then again, earlier I mentioned the REO, which means it's a bank real estate owned property. And again, if the property is sold at auction, it becomes REO. Now, whether it becomes a HUD property, so it's an REO for HUD, an REO for the VA, or an REO for Wells Fargo or Countrywide or Covia. That is what an REO is. So these are some of the basic terms and a little bit of how this whole foreclosure structure works. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. It's Larry at 303-944-2277. That's 944-2277. And you can also email me at help@foreclosureanswerman.com. Now, I'm just in the process of getting that email set up, so it's best to give me a call. But eventually, you'll be able to just email me at help@foreclosureanswerman.com. So thank you for joining us today, and I just trust you have a wonderful day, and hopefully you're just not in the foreclosure process, but if you are, feel free to give us a call. Well, I didn't do that right. Feel free to give us a call, and we'll help you in any way we can. Again, I'm your host, Larry Bass, with the real estate team here in the Denver area, 303-944-2277. Have a great day.